Minjun *** is the deadliest Black Ops mercenary in the country. Wherever he goes, he leaves a trail of ghosts. Only Hannah, his girlfriend, can soften his brutal world. But during a highly illegal deal, corrupt presidential candidate Park Soo orders his men to kidnap her. Minjun pursues them like a madman, catching a glimpse of Park Soo driving away with a twisted smile. Suddenly, a gunshot pierces the air. Hannah falls into a pool of blood. Minjun stands frozen in horror until a heavy blow knocks him unconscious. When he wakes up, a smoking gun is planted in his hand. The setup is perfect. The agency framed him for Hannah's murder. Trapped in a massive ambush, Minjun uses his lethal instincts to escape the dragnet. Catching his breath in the shadows, he makes a silent oath. He will tear this country apart to get his vengeance. While running from the grid, he collides with Jia, a terrified young woman fleeing her abusive stepmother. Recognizing his nationality, she begs for help. Minjun turns his back and walks away. Moments later, Jia is recaptured by her pursuers. Just as despair sets in, Minjun suddenly reappears. He orders her to run. The lead tracker steps up to eliminate the nuisance, but instead, he becomes the prey. Minjun fights like a cornered beast, delivering a shattering knee strike and ending the fight with a brutal spinning chokehold. Only then does he spot the badge. The man is a police officer. Panic hits. Minjun dashes out into the street, where he sees Jia trapped inside a moving car, tearfully begging him with her eyes. He hesitates for a second, but keeps running. He has too much on his plate to carry anyone else. 6 months later, Minjun lives completely off the grid, working as a silent night shift repairman. One evening, he is called for an emergency repair on a high-rise penthouse. In the elevator, a kind concierge warns him about the extreme winds outside. Minjun adjusts his harness, opens the window, and steps out onto the ledge like an urban ghost. In the room below, an attractive woman slips a lethal white powder into a glass of wine. Congressman Kong, a powerful presidential candidate, enters and downs the drink in one gulp. At that exact moment, Minjun appears outside the window. Kong turns in absolute panic, vertigo overtakes him, and he collapses. The woman winks at Minjun and pulls the curtains shut. Immediately, black-masked assassins burst into the building. Minjun senses the trap and shouts at the concierge to run, but she is brutally gunned down. Rage ignites. Minjun throws a heavy tool, shattering the bulletproof glass. He takes down the assassins one by one with his bare hands. During the struggle, he notices a highly distinct scar on the wrist of the lead attacker, the exact same scar from the night his girlfriend died. The plot is thickening, and the real mastermind is about to be exposed. If you love dark, fast-paced thrillers like this, smash that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily deep dives into the wild world of cinema. A private army arrives in mass, forcing the masked men to retreat. Minjun stealthily escapes only after ensuring the concierge is loaded into an ambulance. Later, Commander Choi stares at the crime scene in disbelief. Looking at the security footage, fear fills his eyes. He recognizes the face. It's Minjun, the military's most lethal ghost agent. Following the chaos, Congressman Kong calls his powerful wife, Madam Jean. He begs her to cover up the scandal. Their marriage is purely a cold business transaction. She gives him political power, and he makes her the first lady. Madam Jean instantly orders her private security force to eliminate the repairman. Minjun prepares to flee his safe house, but an elite squad surrounds the building. Commander Choi begs to cancel the operation, warning that his men will die, but Madam Jean refuses. Minutes later, the elite squad is utterly crushed. Minjun holds back his lethal strikes, leaving them all unconscious before vanishing into the night. To stay off the radar, Minjun retreats deep into a quiet rural village. On the road, he helps an elderly couple with a broken-down car, gaining their trust and a temporary place to hide. Meanwhile, Madam Jean explodes with fury at the failure. Commander Choi explains that Minjun was their top special forces asset who now works for Blackstone, a terrifying global mercenary agency. Her private army stands no chance. Soon, a ruthless assassin tracks Minjun down. The killer breaks into the farmhouse, ties up the elderly couple, and pours gasoline everywhere. At the last possible second, Minjun bursts through the door. He moves like lightning, dodging strikes and neutralizing the intruder after a fierce brawl. Furious, Minjun demands answers. The killer confesses the order came directly from Madam Jean, and that anyone who helps Minjun will burn. To protect the innocent, Minjun infiltrates Madam Jin's heavily guarded mansion alone. She is completely unfazed, mocking him with a cold smile. Minjun warns her that if she ever targets the people around him again, it will be the day she dies. Suddenly, armed guards ambush him. They subdue him, tie him up, and lock him in the trunk of a car. Enduring agonizing pain, Minjun uses motor oil to dislocate his thumb and slip the handcuffs. When the guards check a noise in the back, he explodes out of the trunk, knocking them out, stealing a weapon, and storming back into the mansion. Suddenly, Jia, who is actually Congressman Kang's hidden, illegitimate daughter, appears holding a gun, screaming at Minjun to pull the trigger on her abusive stepmother. As guards close in, Minjun takes Madam Jean hostage and demands a getaway car. He retrieves a hidden phone from a flower pot that recorded her confessing to her crimes, warns her the footage will leak if he dies, and smashes the device. On the road, the getaway car suddenly accelerates out of control. A rival faction has hacked the vehicle's electronic system from a trailing motorcycle. The brakes are dead. In a split-second maneuver, Min-jun swaps seats with Madame Jean, slams the gas, and spins the car 360 degrees, opening fire on the bikers. The car hurtles violently into a construction zone and flips upside down. Both are left severely injured. Construction workers drag Min-jun from the wreckage as a massive fire erupts. Ignoring the danger, Min-jun tears the mangled door open, braves the intense heat, and carries Madame Jean out of the flames just as the car explodes, shielding her body with his own. For the first time, something fundamentally shifts inside Madame Jean. She begins to deeply trust the man who just saved her life, ordering her doctors to do everything to save him. The assassination attempt blasts across the national news. To capitalize on the chaos, Madame Jean intentionally messes up her husband's hair and clothing before sending him to the press. Congressman Kong delivers a perfectly crafted, tearful speech, announcing he is abandoning the presidential race to protect his family. The masterclass in political manipulation works perfectly. The public supports him more than ever. Meanwhile, Commander Choi visits Min-jun's hospital bed, offering him a permanent position in their elite private army to protect the family from the shadows. Commander Choi offers Min-jun a clean record and a new identity, but Min-jun flatly refuses. He has already been abandoned and betrayed twice. He will never serve another corrupt organization. He cares about only one thing: hunting down the monster responsible for Hannah's death. By pure chance, Min-jun comes face-to-face with the corrupt candidate, Park Soo, inside a hospital elevator. Instantly, the horrific memories of Hannah's murder flood his mind. Min-jun reaches for his weapon, but suddenly, his chest tightens and he cannot breathe. Ever since that bloody night, he has suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. A security guard drags a paralyzed Min-jun out of the elevator. Min-jun watches the doors close on his target, burning with a feeling of absolute helplessness. The guard warns him that Park Soo is now one of the most powerful men in the country. Getting close to him is a suicide mission. Driven by pure obsession, Min-jun returns to his hideout and builds a custom, proximity-triggered bomb. The next day, he tracks Park Soo to a high-end barber shop. Pretending to lose his wallet, Min-jun distracts the staff and slickly plants a tracking sensor directly into the candidate's jacket pocket. He then hides the bomb inside the shop's revolving glass door, waiting for the perfect moment. But just as Park Soo approaches the exit, a child runs in front of him. The revolving door jams. The politician is redirected to a side exit, completely escaping the blast radius. Suspicious of the malfunction, a sharp guard eyes Min-jun and demands to verify his identity. Spotting the unique combat scar on Min-jun's wrist, the guard recognizes him from the penthouse extraction. Without a single word, a brutal fistfight erupts. As heavy reinforcements flood the building, Min-jun retreats to the rooftop, snaps on a pre-staged zipline harness, and leaps into the abyss. To his shock, a luxury car is waiting for him in the alleyway below. Inside sits Madame Jean. She warns him that his face is now plastered across every agency database, and hunting Park Soo alone is impossible. She proposes a deadly alliance. They combine forces to destroy Park Soo together. Desperate for vengeance, Min-jun accepts. On his first day at the conglomerate's headquarters, Min-jun is fast-tracked into the elite VIP security squad. The team leader welcomes him with cold hostility, promising that the veteran guards will never accept an outsider. Min-jun remains silent. In the locker room, the squad surrounds him, planning to teach the rookie a painful lesson. They have no idea who they are dealing with. Min-jun completely humiliates them, breaking bones and taking down the entire squad one by one with bare knuckles, making his terrifying special ops dominance crystal clear. Recognizing his skill, the leader gives Min-jun his first official assignment: protecting Jia, Madame Jean's hidden stepdaughter. Madame Jean strictly orders that until the presidential election concludes, Jia must remain completely locked away from the world. Min-jun complies, tracking every security camera angle of her heavily guarded villa. Late that night, Min-jun watches his monitors as Jia slips out of her bedroom. He stays on high alert, tracing her movements down into the dark kitchen. She rummages through the cabinets, uncovers a single packet of instant ramen, and begins dancing around the room with pure, childlike happiness. Watching the monitor, the cold mercenary allows himself a rare, soft smile. But Jia is clumsy. She struggles to light the gas stove, fails repeatedly, and finally gives up, hugging the dry ramen packet in dejection before walking away. Min-jun grows restless, frustrated that he can't simply tell her the main gas valve is locked. Unable to ignore it, he steps out onto the terrace and spots a shadow on the roof. Climbing the villa's walls like an urban rock climber, he breaches the roofline. Everything is safe. Jia is simply sitting under the stars, eating dry ramen and gently sharing the noodles with a stray cat and its kitten. Watching the animals retreat, Jia thinks of her late mother and bursts into tears. Min-jun later slips into the attic, discovering an old photograph of Jia with her real parents. He stares at it quietly, feeling a deep sense of pity for a girl trapped in a destiny she never chose. The following night, Min-jun sneaks into the kitchen, prepares a pot of boiling hot water, and runs back to the control room. Jia enters the kitchen and gasps at the anonymous surprise. But while she cooks, she notices a strange glare in the corner. Suddenly, Minjun's monitor goes completely pitch black. Panicking, he rapidly switches camera angles until the feed recovers. On the screen, Jia is dancing completely free in the shadows, realizing someone is finally watching over her. For the first time in years, Minjun feels a genuine spark of happiness. Shortly after, Madame Jean receives news of her wealthy aunt's sudden death. She dresses meticulously, fully prepared to inherit the massive corporate empire left behind. The funeral is locked down with ironclad, military-grade security. Madame Jean explicitly requests Minjun to act as her personal chauffeur and shield. Following the grim ceremony, she heads into a high-stakes family legal meeting. Before she enters the private boardroom, Minjun discreetly slides a tactical pen into her purse, instructing her to click it only if her life is in danger. The moment Madame Jean crosses the threshold, the heavy doors slam shut and lock. The family lawyer coldly announces that the aunt did not leave the shares to Madame Jean. The room turns lethal as corrupt family board members close in. Terrified, Madame Jean panics and presses the pen, losing her only hidden psychological lifeline. Outside the heavy doors, Minjun instantly feels the signal. Knowing she is trapped, he grabs a heavy security umbrella and storms the boardroom alone. He faces 6 highly trained bodyguards, systematically dismantling them one by one in a flurry of brutal strikes. Minjun slams the emergency fire alarm, and heavy water rains down from the ceiling. Amidst the flashing lights and screaming executives, Minjun spots Madame Jean, soaked, trembling, and completely vulnerable. He steps forward, opens his umbrella over her head, and softly tells her not to worry. In that exact cinematic moment, Madame Jean looks at him and sees her dark night. Her trust in him transforms into something deep and dangerous. Thanks to this absolute loyalty, Minjun is granted exclusive access to the conglomerate's inner sanctum. With the war against Park Soo about to begin, Madame Jean demands to know the truth about Minjun's past. When he refuses to speak, she decides to break his defenses by revealing her ultimate secret. Hidden deep within the building is an advanced, rogue artificial intelligence, a digital magic mirror that answers only to her voice. Stunned by her transparency, Minjun finally confesses that Park Soo murdered his girlfriend, Hannah. Madame Jean commands the AI to analyze the historical data. The machine uncovers a devastating truth. Park Soo had been illegally selling advanced military weapons to foreign rebels. Hannah, working as an innocent translator, accidentally discovered the paper trail, and Park Soo had her executed to bury the evidence. Meanwhile, back at the villa, Jia watches a live news broadcast announcing that her corrupt father will be attending a massive public religious event the next day. Convincing herself that her father's abandonment was purely due to Madame Jin's deadly threats, she plots her escape. Waiting for her personal bodyguard to step away, Jia acts silently. She slips heavy sedatives into the guard's coffee, waits for the drugs to take effect, and steals the guard's ID and wallet. Disguising herself in the guard's tactical gear and hiding her hair, she walks right past the perimeter security completely unnoticed. Her first destination is a secluded nursing home to find the old maid who witnessed her mother's final days. The elderly woman, suffering from severe dementia, suddenly experiences a flash of terror. She grips Jia's arm and screams a fractured memory, ordering Jia's mother to flee the country before Madame Jean murders her. The raw fear in the old woman's voice confirms a horrific certainty in Jia's mind. Her stepmother is a cold-blooded killer. At that very moment, Madame Jean is busy orchestrating her husband's flawless public image at the Grand Cathedral. She walks gracefully by his side, smiling for the cameras as they climb the church steps. But the holy solemnity is completely shattered when Jia suddenly appears on the main altar stage. Dressed flawlessly as a choir nun, she begins to sing. In the front row, Congressman Kong lowers his head in absolute terror. If his hidden, illegitimate daughter is unmasked by the press, his entire political career and presidential campaign will instantly collapse into ashes. The private security guards make a stealthy move to grab her, but the archbishop stops them with a stern, public gesture. As the dark hymn ends, the rest of the choir exits the stage, leaving only Jia standing alone with tear-filled eyes. She fixes a burning, vengeful gaze directly onto her father. Her father doesn't dare look her in the eye, while next to him, Madame Jin's face turns to pure ice, ready to eliminate the girl the moment the cameras turn off. In the end, Jia doesn't say a single word. She slowly steps off the platform and vanishes into the back of the church. Minjun tries to sprint after her, but by the time he cuts through the crowd, she is gone. In her place, she leaves a crumpled note, begging her father to come save her. But Congressman Kong is too weak to act. He doesn't even blame her for the public stunt. Completely paralyzed by fear of his wife, Jia retreats to a secluded park, the very place she used to visit with her parents as a child. Nearby, a group of teenagers are laughing and taking selfies. Unintentionally, Jia is captured in the background of their photo. The image goes viral online, acting as a digital beacon. Madame Jin's strike team instantly pinpoints her location. Sitting on a bench, Jia closes her eyes and prays for her father to arrive. When she opens them, she finds Minjun standing there instead. He gently hands her a strawberry ice cream cone, lying that her father bought it for her. Jia smiles, devouring it happily. But within seconds, her throat tightens. She gasps for air, staggers, and collapses. The accompanying maid screams in horror. Jia is severely allergic to strawberries. Minjun reacts with military precision. He administers immediate mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, stabilizing her airway before lifting her into his arms. Because of her highly classified identity, he cannot risk taking her to a public hospital. He sprints through the streets directly to the conglomerate's private infirmary. Watching her fragile body fight for life pierces him with intense guilt. Luckily, the doctors treat her just in time. She survives. As she recovers, Minjun watches her through the intensive care glass, feeling a rare flash of warmth. Later, the squad trainer reveals Jia's tragic past. Her mother died under mysterious circumstances when she was a toddler, and she was immediately exiled to a foreign country. The revelation deeply moves Minjun, hardening his resolve to protect this broken girl. When Jia finally wakes up, Madame Jean rushes into the room, playing the worried stepmother. Jia rejects her with burning fury. Madame Jean drops her mask, delivering a brutal truth. Congressman Kong is a selfish coward who will never sacrifice his career for his daughter. Meanwhile, Kong is in a backstage dressing room, completely oblivious to an ambush set by his rival, Park Soo. He enters a private bathroom where an assassin waits with a sedative weapon. Tracking the threat, Minjun bursts through the door. He forces the stunned politician through a fierce tactical escape, risking his life to drag him safely to the campus infirmary. Minjun is risking everything to protect the innocent, but the political web is turning deadly. If you want to see who survives this high-stakes thriller, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment below with your predictions for the grand finale. Safe inside, a guilt-ridden Kong begs Minjun to protect Jia to the bitter end. Madame Jean watches the hospital reunion through hidden cameras. When the room clears, a weeping Jia accuses Madame Jean of murdering her mother. Kong refuses to listen, warning her not to ruin his campaign. Jia freezes, realizing she is nothing but a political burden to him. Watching the feed, Madame Jean mocks herself for handing her destiny to such a fool. Minjun drives a broken Jia back to her villa. She realizes he is the only person who has never lied to her. But as she steps out, flashbulbs pop. A hidden photographer snaps her picture. Years ago during her exile, a famous designer photographed her running. Mesmerized, the designer just offered a massive global reward to find this mystery angel. Minjun seizes the opportunity. He leaks her location to the media as the designer's missing muse. Within hours, journalists surround the villa, creating a public shield. Park Soo's hitmen mobilize to execute her under the chaos, but Minjun is waiting. He eliminates the snipers on adjacent roofs before engaging a squad of professional assassins. The hand-to-hand combat is a brutal bloodbath. With the battle raging outside, Jia steps directly in front of the flashing cameras. In a steel-cold voice, she reveals her true lineage, throwing the corporate empire into absolute chaos. Outside, Minjun gains the upper hand, leaving the assassins broken. Impressed by the media play, Madame Jean praises Minjun's genius. Her arrogant secretary suspects he engineered the crisis to manipulate them, completely unaware they are falling into the trap of the man plotting their downfall. From that day, Minjun and Jia grow inseparable. But the danger isn't over. The ruthless secretary warns Minjun to stop playing psychological games. Minjun ignores her, walking straight into the boardroom to confront Madame Jean. He vows he will never let Jia end up dead like Hannah. Madame Jean rapidly regains her composure, redirecting her focus toward destroying Park Soo. She uses her advanced AI magic mirror to hunt for a definitive paper trail of his crimes. But as she steps out of the elevator, she freezes. Her corrupt half-brother, Choi, is forcibly loading Jia into a vehicle, claiming he is taking his niece to dinner. Powerless to stop him in public, she commands Minjun to trail them. It's a setup. Choi leads them into a massive ambush, and Jia vanishes. Madame Jean loses her mind, ordering her private army to scour the state. Unexpectedly, Choi calls Minjun, leaking her location. Minjun races to the coordinates, finding her unharmed. But Jia has changed. Realizing anyone who uncovers her identity is marked for death, she aligns with her uncle to strip Madame Jean of her empire. It is a cold move for survival. Over the following days, Minjun and Jia live on the run like a real couple, savoring a fleeting taste of true freedom. But the illusion shatters when she uncovers her mother's sealed autopsy report. The files prove she died in agonizing physical trauma, not from an overdose. Armed with proof, Jia appears on a live television program, promising to expose her mother's killer. Jia is now a ticking nuclear bomb. Madame Jean orders her secretary to execute the girl immediately, but commands her to leave Minjun alive. Assassins disguised as maintenance staff infiltrate the villa. Spotting the breach, Minjun forces Jia into a hidden ventilation shaft. He calls Madame Jean to halt the hit, but the jealous secretary intercepts the call, ordering the squad to slaughter them both. A hellish battle erupts. Minjun fights with savage intensity against overwhelming numbers. Seeing him cornered, Jia exits the vents, weaponizing a heavy fire extinguisher to smash through the attackers. They fight back-to-back until both collapse from exhaustion. Simultaneously, a rival faction traps Congressman Kong in his office, blocking him from the critical presidential vote. Madame Jean calls an emergency council. Cornered, she concludes Park Soo must be assassinated tonight. Min-jun accepts the suicide mission on one condition. Madame Jean must guarantee Jia's safety and hand over the secretary. The secretary feigns compliance, but secretly orders the team leader to execute Min-jun during the chaos. Min-jun says a silent goodbye to Jia, promising to return alive. Disguised in tactical gear, Min-jun and his team leader breach Park Su's compound. Suddenly, an encrypted code exposes their identities to the automated defense grid. Heavy gunfire rains down. The team leader is struck. Min-jun returns devastating suppressive fire, dragging his wounded comrade through the war zone just before the blast doors seal shut. Inside the fortified bunker, Park Su falls to his knees, begging for his life. Min-jun raises his weapon, but remembers his promise to Jia. He lowers the gun. He forces Park Su to call off his political traps, clearing Congressman Kong of all charges. The mission is an absolute success. Min-jun returns to the villa. At the same moment, an enraged Kong storms into the mansion, threatening to tear up his contract if his daughter is ever touched again. Madame Jean feels her heart shatter, regretting the love she wasted on an ambitious puppet. Composing her exterior, she goes to find Min-jun, only to see him celebrating his survival with Jia. Watching from the shadows, a weeping Madame Jean realizes she found the perfect man at the absolute wrong time. The next day, Min-jun arrives at headquarters to a hero's welcome. But the true war is just beginning. Using the magic mirror, Madame Jean extracts a critical clue. The president's son, Kim, holds a memory card capable of obliterating the entire corrupt regime. Min-jun stakes out the target for days. He instructs his team to conduct a highly visible, clumsy surveillance campaign. Spooked by the obvious tales, Kim panics, racing to a hidden compartment inside a local church to verify the card. Realizing he was played, Kim attempts to flee, but Park Su's cleanup crew ambushes him. Min-jun charges into the crossfire, neutralizing the hitmen and tearing the memory card from Kim's hands. But as he turns, a high-caliber bullet pierces his stomach. Bleeding out rapidly, he drops into the tall grass, desperately hiding the card before collapsing. Commander Choi arrives at the final second, pulling his bloodied body into an SUV. Seeing Min-jun covered in blood, Madame Jean completely loses her mind, screaming at her medical staff to save him. The surgeons extract the bullet, but the massive blood loss plunges Min-jun into a deep coma. For the first time in her cold life, Madame Jean falls to her knees and prays. Min-jun survives, but the nightmare escalates. As news of the shootout hits the press, the agency frames the unconscious mercenary, branding Min-jun the city's most wanted fugitive. Terrified of life in prison, the city's most powerful businessmen, including her treacherous half-brother Choi, call an emergency meeting. Inside the hospital, the president's son, Kim, finally wakes up. Remembering Min-jun saved his life, he uses his high-level political leverage to call off the citywide manhunt. With the police withdrawing, Madame Jean realizes Min-jun secured the evidence before collapsing. She commands her forces to locate the hidden card at all costs. Meanwhile, Congressman Kong wants it just as badly to destroy his rival, Park Su, and break free from his wife's absolute control. Jia learns Min-jun is in a coma and sprints into headquarters. Desperate, she drops to her knees, calling her bitter enemy, Madame Jean, mother. Stunned by this submission, Madame Jean confirms his critical condition. She promises to save him on one brutal condition. Jia must leave Korea forever. To save the man she loves, Jia accepts the exile and boards a private plane bound for Spain. The moment the aircraft doors seal, Park Su's mercenaries breach the cabin and capture her. Outside, Choi joins forces with Park Su to orchestrate a coup against Madame Jean. Having bribed her top security chief, they infiltrate headquarters with 600 pounds of military-grade explosives, taking the building hostage in minutes. Sensing the breach, Madame Jean seals herself inside the fortified bunker room. Choi activates the countdown timer, demanding control of the conglomerate. Amidst the suffocating tension, Park Su calls the bunker, demanding the memory card. Suddenly, Min-jun's voice cuts through the line. Forcing his way back to consciousness, he subtly signals Madame Jean to play along. Min-jun steps forward, offering to retrieve the card in exchange for immunity and protection. Seeing his severe, bleeding stomach wound, Park Su agrees, believing he is acting out of pure survival. Before leaving, Min-jun begs Madame Jean to let go of her toxic empire and choose a new life. She remains silent, whispering that she regrets not meeting him under better circumstances. The moment Min-jun steps out, the deadly game accelerates. Madame Jean commands her AI magic mirror to locate the families of every traitor, hiring local assassins to eliminate them in real time. Her compromised security chief drops to his knees, begging for mercy. But Madame Jean has none left. She places $1 million bounty on Choi's head over the intercom. Desperate, Choi reveals a chilling failsafe. He is wearing a biometric heart rate sensor wired directly to the bomb. If his heart stops, the entire building detonates instantly. Meanwhile, Min-jun unearths the memory card from the blood-stained grass, but a cleanup squad ambushes him. Just as he is about to be overwhelmed, Commander Choi storms the alleyway, gunning down the attackers. Realizing that keeping the evidence hidden puts everyone in a lethal crossfire, they decide to broadcast the files to the national media immediately. Congressman Kong completely disagrees. He arrives at the safe house, furiously pressuring them to hand over the card for his presidential ambitions. Disgusted by his unyielding greed, Min-jun triggers a tactical demolition, vaporizing the safe house right in front of the politician's eyes. Suddenly, a guard breaks the news. Park Soo has kidnapped Jia, and the location is a setup. Learning his lover is in danger, Min-jun speeds into the night, driving like a madman. Park Soo orders Kong to the industrial sector to trade the card for his daughter. Kong accepts. Min-jun arrives at the desolate factory first, dismantling the vanguard with savage determination. But he is too late. Jia has already been moved back to headquarters to act as a human shield for Choi. En route, Kang's assistant uncovers a terrifying technical detail. Once the countdown hits 0, the bomb cannot be reversed. Park Soo plans to vaporize the entire building, eliminating all his rivals at once. On the road, the convoy escorting Jia is ambushed. Madame Jin's loyal secretary sprints out to rescue her, but Choi intercepts her on the lower levels, shooting her point blank before dragging a terrified Jia into the boardroom. Choi corners Kong, demanding the card at gunpoint. Madame Jin throws her own body in the path of the weapon, taking a bullet to protect her husband. Horrified and desperate to save his bleeding wife, Kong surrenders the memory card. Min-jun bursts through the doors, clutching his bleeding abdomen, and delivers the final, crushing truth. The bomb is irreversible. It is a suicide trap. Checking the terminal, a horrified Choi realizes Park Soo completely betrayed him. To make matters worse, the automated grid cuts the building's primary power. The elevator is rendered useless. Bleeding out on the floor, Madame Jin looks up at Jia and confesses the dark secret that haunted them for 15 years. It was actually Jia's own father who hired a hitman to execute her mother to protect his career. Madame Jin admits she found her dying, but stopped her hand because she realized love cannot be shared. Even with this horrific revelation piercing her heart, Jia decides to save her. Min-jun calculates a desperate escape path utilizing industrial safety ropes. Realizing he is trapped, a psychotic Choi grabs Jia, shooting her in the leg and severing the main safety line, sending it plummeting into the void. Seeing their only exit destroyed, Min-jun charges back into the burning boardroom to pull Madame Jin out. Exhausted, she refuses to move, whispering that she just wants to rest. The surviving team members gather their remaining strength, forcing the injured Jia into the heavy reinforced elevator cabin. Min-jun commands Commander Choi to manually sever the main steel suspension cables, calculating that the heavy emergency shock absorbers at the bottom can buffer the blast. Suddenly, Congressman Kong steps forward. Acknowledging he was a horrific father, he vows to perform one final act of true redemption. Turning his back on the shaft, he drags the heavy explosive framework into the center of the boardroom, using his own body to contain the primary thermal shockwave. Madame Jin weeps, begging him to run, but he smiles, choosing to stand by her side until the absolute end. The cables are severed. The elevator cabin drops into a freefall just as the explosives detonate. A blinding flash rips through the upper levels, shattering the corporate skyscraper. Thanks to Min-jun's calculations, the reinforced cabin holds against the falling debris. The city trembles as the dust slowly clears and night falls with sirens wailing in the distance. 1 month later, a fully healed Min-jun stands before an international military tribunal, delivering definitive testimony against the rogue special ops group. Returning to Korea, he ensures that Park Soo is locked inside a maximum security prison for life. The surviving loyal secretary tracks down Choi in the criminal underground, executing him to avenge Madame Jin. Jia is named the sole legal heir to the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Despising the toxic power that destroyed her family, she uploads the entire contents of the hidden memory card to the internet, completely shattering the political and corporate foundations of the country forever. With their debts paid, Jia and Min-jun choose to leave the shadows behind. They relocate to a quiet, sun-drenched coastal town in Spain. Walking hand in hand through the peaceful streets,